Playing a healer can be rather complicated, if not a little intimidating, because not only do you have to learn how to effectively heal, but you're also responsible for keeping the party alive. And because of this, many people will shy away from trying to heal. With that being said, if you're looking to pick up healer, here are 4 key tips to help you on your healing journey. No matter the role or job you choose to play, learning and understanding your kit is crucial, and this is arguably even more true for healers, as they have a few extra quirks to them that are either easy to miss or misunderstand. For example, take an ability like Scholar's Dissipate. This consumes your fairy in exchange for 3 Aether Pool, along with also providing a 20% increase to healing magic potency. Now, the Aether Pool that the ability gives is used for healing. However, these are healing abilities rather than healing spells, meaning they're unaffected by that 20% healing buff given by Dissipate. In fact, this 20% healing buff only applies to Scholar's GCD heals, those being Physic, Adloquium, and Succor, as they are healing spells. Now let's compare this to another one of Scholar's abilities, Protraction, which is a 10% increase to healing actions rather than healing magic. Unlike the buff that Dissipate gives, Protraction buffs any healing from any source, no matter if it's a spell or an ability. And the confusion doesn't stop there, as something else you need to know with these healing buffs is that delayed heals and regens aren't buffed retroactively. So if you have a regen on you and then receive a healing buff, the regen won't increase. But if you use a regen the last second before losing a healing buff, the regen will be increased for the entire duration, despite no longer having the healing buff. Things like this are why understanding your kit is so important, because things don't always work how you think they do. And if you don't learn the nuances of not only the role, but your given healer, then you'll end up wasting more resources than necessary, making your job more difficult. Within the healing role, there are 2 subcategories, shield healers and pure healers, both of which play rather differently. Shield healers focus on using mitigations and big shields to help prevent damage, meaning they are more proactive, wanting to use their kit before damage happens, but when it comes to actually healing damage afterwards, they tend to be a bit weaker. On the other end of the spectrum, we have pure healers, who are much the opposite. They focus on powerful bursty heals and strong regens, which leads to them being more reactive, meaning they want to use their kits after damage happens. But because they have such strong heals, they don't have many ways to lower or prevent damage. Now, neither of these 2 is stronger than the other. In fact, they are intended to work in tandem, the strengths of one making up for the weaknesses of the other. Shield healers keeping the party alive, while pure healers keep the party healthy. So when it comes to picking a healer, there isn't a wrong answer, but what is important is playing to your given healer's strengths. If you're a scholar, then you're going to want to use things like Excog or Adloquium long before the tank ever touches a mob, whereas a white mage won't really start healing the tank until they're already half or below. Now, if you were to try to play a scholar reactively, you'd find yourself playing a game of catch-up. And if you were to try to play a white mage proactively, you would end up overhealing by a significant amount. Of course, there are exceptions in their kit. White mage's Temperance is a mitigation, so you'd want to use it before damage, and Scholar's Whispering Dawn is a regen, so you'd want to use it after damage. But overall, their kits mostly fall into the proactive or reactive camps, and to be successful, you want to keep this in mind and make sure you use their abilities properly. The key to succeeding as a healer is doing as much as possible with as little as possible, and this is something a lot of new healers really struggle with. I can't even begin to count the times I have watched new healers strain to keep a tank alive just because they aren't being efficient with their heals. And I believe the worst offender of this is Cure 1 and Benefict 1 for Astro and White Mage. These are the first 2 heals available for these jobs, and because of this they are very weak, but cheap to cast. They also have a proc that will randomly trigger after being cast that will buff the better versions of the spells Cure 2 and Benefict 2. Now, so many new healers believe they should use the weaker version by default to heal because it's cheaper and they can possibly buff the stronger version, but there's 2 major problems with this. First, the chance of getting the proc is 15%, and even if you do get it, the benefit isn't that great. You either get a free cast or a slightly stronger heal on a target you're already spamming with heals to get the proc. And the worst part is, by the time you get the proc, the fight might be over, so it won't even get used. As for the second reason, it comes back to efficiency. Why would you cast 2 heals when you could accomplish the same thing with 1? And this is actually a question you should be asking yourself constantly because it will help you be more efficient. Why use 2 GCDs when you could use 1? Why use 1 GCD when you could use 2 OGCDs? Or why use 2 OGCDs when you could use 1 OGCD? Eventually it will become second nature and you'll start to get better at using more optimal heals, which as a result will make your life easier. Now before we end this section, let's go over a couple extra efficient efficiency tips, starting with cooldowns and the dreaded too good to use syndrome. Far too often will people hold off on using powerful cooldowns because they feel they need to save them for emergencies. But the problem with this is that emergency may never come, meaning all you're doing is depriving yourself of a powerful tool. So don't be afraid to drop those powerful cooldowns, and the sooner the better, as the quicker you use it, the more likely you are to get another cast in your given instance. The next big tip comes with comboing abilities. If you're going to use multiple spells to heal, then try to choose ones that complement one another. For example, White Mage's Temperance gives a mitigation but also boosts your GCD heals, so it's better to use Temperance in conjunction with your Lilies, which will be buffed by it, than say your Tetra or Bell, which won't. Healers are just green DPS. This is likely something you have heard before, and that's because it's true. As a healer, you're expected to do damage, and your damage does matter. Generally speaking, the DPS makeup of a given party is 60% DPS, 40% support, give or take. This means in a 4-man party, you're responsible for about 20% of the party's DPS, and in an 8-man, roughly 8 to 10%. So if you aren't doing good damage, then your party needs to do more to compensate. But the thing with doing damage as a healer is it's kind of a form of healing. How, you may ask? Well, think of it this way. If you do no damage in a dungeon, that means on average, mobs will live for about 20% longer, which of course means they'll do more damage. Now, if you were doing really good damage, the mobs would die faster, meaning they'll do less damage and you'll have to heal less. And this is definitely something you'll see as a healer. You'll have times when DPS is really low and it's more difficult to heal, and you'll also have times when DPS is really high and you basically have to do nothing. Now, part of the reason new healers struggle with doing damage is because they get into their heads this idea that the party needs to be full health at all times, and this just isn't true. Your job as a healer is to keep the party alive, not necessarily healthy. Meaning, if at the end of a fight, everyone in your party is at 1 HP, then you've done your job. Moreover, if you try to heal every point of damage, realistically you'll end up wasting the majority of your heals. It's all about balance. Get comfortable with your abilities. Learn how quickly you can heal a party or a person if you need to. Once you have an idea of your capability, then you can start letting more damage happen before you heal. And while you're waiting for that damage to happen, you can DPS away, only stopping when you reach that threshold where you need to heal. For example, as a White Mage, I could realistically let the tank drop to as low as 1 HP, because all it takes is a single button press in the form of Benediction to fully heal them. So while I wait for the tank's health to drop, I can just DPS until I need to use my Benediction. Now, starting off, it's going to be a bit scary, don't get me wrong, but as you get more comfortable with the role, the more damage you'll start to let happen, and the more damage you yourself will start to do. And this really goes hand in hand with the previous tip of efficiency. As the further in levels you get, the more you'll start relying on OGCDs rather than your GCDs, at which point you can start asking yourself the question of, can I heal the party while also doing DPS? And that marks the end of our final tip. Hopefully you've learned a few things that will help you improve your healing and be a bit more confident with it. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and please consider checking out one of my other guides, which should be at the sides. And with that, good luck with your future healing, and I wish you all the best.